Aerodrome's AERO token has a huge hurdle that many people tend to overlook when they are simply looking at the price of an asset and potentially top of the iceberg type of metrics. Because I always say that a DEX or a DeFi protocol is technically the backup or the underlying infrastructure behind the price reflection of its token. And Aerodrome's AERO is no different, but is also different, so to speak. So, like I said, unfortunately, right now the price of AERO isn't doing so well, and people see this as an opportunity to load up on the token, but overlook the fact that there are some things that they should be aware of that potentially could make or break the decision to do so. Sorry to interrupt you there, folks. I just want to quickly chime in and give you a quick update on our development. So contracts are still being in development, and we have been testing out the product for the past 45 days. I just released a tweet. This is what you are expecting, all right? So a naked USDC and naked USDC out, and those are the annualized return over that period of 45 days. That's the range that you see in front of you. Now remember, markets are risky, markets are dynamic, but the goal here is to always optimize our strategy in order to give you the best return on just supplying USDC. That is the end game. Soft launch announcement coming in soon. So let's look at things and metrics that people tend to ignore overall. So, top of the iceberg metrics, the TVL is doing great. So if you come to DeFi Llama, for example, and you look at the TVL curve in USD, as well as relative valuation in Ethereum, because that's also important. Remember, most of these tokens are built on either Ethereum or the underlying L2s. So it's very important to look at the relative valuation to ETH. Still pretty good, almost the same, more or less, mimicking. All right, that's the TVL. So Dune Analytics is a really cool platform if you want to look at protocol metrics. And if you just sort out, you see the TVL overall, like I showed you, the curve is good. Because we're currently in this epoch, you cannot really see the full-blown scope of the bribes plus fees, but the trajectory is nice, right? You can clearly see that the last couple of epochs we're touching an all-time high in terms of bribes plus rewards overall. So people, are using the DEX, people are putting in their projects, bribing in, so on and so forth. So everything from that perspective is good. All right. If you scroll a bit down, we can go and reach volume is also, keeping up. It's not dropping much. It is fluctuating, as you can see right here. There is fluctuation from epoch to epoch, but eventually it catches up to the previous highs. We've checked this previously. We checked the average lockup of AERO, and we've seen that it was, almost 4 years. So things are still looking great. More than 50% of the current supply is being locked up, and with the receipt of AERO, that's great, right? That's pretty amazing. Now here's where we start to look at the underlying cracks between quotation marks on the token side. Remember, we're not talking on the DEX side, we're talking on the token side. The price is struggling, right? So we can clearly see, based on the chart right here, we see that the price moved a lot, surged a lot, it corrected a bit. And when people saw the stick, they were like, okay, here's the reversal. But unfortunately, the market didn't allow for this to happen. There was an additional drop. It dropped below 90 cents. People got really scared. Then it bumped up above $1. So $1 is a very psychological barrier right now for people in AERO. It is a decent price discovery point, so to speak. I think this is right now the benchmark. So when it drops below $1, then we are in trouble. When it goes above $1, people tend to relax. The major thing that you need to understand about AERO's token inflation is that, one, there's no total supply. So right now, if you go on the holders list of Aerodrome's AERO token, you see that there is 1.4048 billion tokens as a total supply, but unfortunately that has no cap, so that will keep increasing on an epoch basis when more tokens are released. Currently it's about 9 to 10 mil per epoch, so inflation doesn't stop in terms of scaling on the upside. Now, of course, it will be disinflationary over time, so the inflation won't be as great, but it will still be there. So what should happen to offset this? They don't burn tokens, so there's no burn address where tokens are being sent to, so to speak, but they are locking up those tokens. So on one hand, you have users doing so, on the other, you have the protocol doing so. And the protocol does so equally in terms of participation in order to incentivize their native liquidity token pools, all right? Meaning AERO USDC, AERO ETH, so on and so forth. So here's one side. Token inflation doesn't stop, it keeps on growing. On the other side of things, you have the argument that, okay, so I lock up my tokens and then I earn bribes, from the plus fee rewards from the protocol's performance, which is great on paper, right? But if you look a bit closer, if you go to the vote section and you look at the incentives column, if you filter down a bit, here I basically filtered out from highest to lowest, but remember, there's still 3 days left, so people and projects tend to add their incentives last minute. So I wouldn't take this for granted, but if you quickly do a scan, you see that at least every 2 pools, you have AERO as incentive rewards. So you don't have much of USDC, Ethereum, other tokens, other coins. You have a lot of AERO being given by these projects. And what this tells me is that these projects have their native pool staked. They are acquiring AERO tokens for themselves and then recycling those AERO tokens for people to bribe for their pool and take a share of. So at the end of the day, that so-called real money coming in is not coming in from other places, it's still within Aerodrome. So you are technically earning also AERO tokens, which in most cases are being dumped on the market, and the chart clearly shows it, right? I mean, look at the numbers of sells versus buys. Now, this is a bit excessive. We have no demand for the past 24 hours, pretty much. So that's barely 10-11% of the total volume. That's not much demand. Now, the number of sells versus buys is always skewed to the right. So retail is always dumping. They're farming, they're dumping. And what do you think they are doing when they get these AERO tokens from the incentives part? They are just selling them on the market. That's pretty clear. So just judging by this, there isn't much money coming in from elsewhere. And to add to my point, if you go and look at the top protocols having their AERO lockups, you can see that overall the curve, of AERO additions on a monthly basis or on an Epoch basis, apologies here, isn't really growing as much. I mean, just as an absolute amount, it used to grow by a factor of 500 to 1000, overall. In terms of holder count, now we have a factor of 50 to 100 holders locking up their tokens. And the protocols themselves, so the big boys, aren't adding up to their allocation unless they have to. So unless they see competition catching up, then they would allocate more. And they are technically doing so from the free AERO tokens they're getting from their native pools, as well as, from the part of them recycling the bribes. Because that's a big part of why these projects keep running. They are recycling the bribes that they are putting in from their huge AERO allocation. They take the majority of it, and then the rest, which is potentially 5 to 10% at most, is going to retail. But that's something I explained. I made so many vids on Aerodrome, by the way, you can check them out. The last one spoke exactly about, that was the topic of the video. Technically how the bribes are being recycled. One last thing I want to mention is that, yes, more than 50% of the current total supply is being locked. But in terms of holder count locking up that supply, we have, if I go back to the first Dune Analytics dashboard, 14,000 AERO holders versus a total of 76.9k of holders overall. So if you discount 14k from 76.5k, 0.9k in this case, you end up at a total of 62k holders of naked AERO tokens that could be sold today or tomorrow or later on. So this is just speculative holding, because these people are not, planning to lock up, otherwise they would have already, right? So they're just waiting for potentially a price increase to unload their tokens on the market. Compare this right now with another DEX, and I'm gonna take the biggest one potentially. AERO is at the 1 billion FDV. Uniswap, which doesn't have a uni inflation from pools or whatsoever, is just inflation coming in from supply lockups, which is, very close to full total supply being on the market. It has a 7.7 FDV, 7 times what AERO has, meaning there's still growth potential there, 100%. But Uni is suppressed right now, and Uni doesn't have this equation in terms of inflation. And remember, Uniswap captures the majority of volume and TVL across all chains. So there's no real comparison there, but you can get the idea. So Aerodrome is a great project. Aerodrome is doing amazing, but the token situation needs to be addressed, and people should know. I'm not saying there's no upside potential. There might as well be, and I think there will be over time. But right now, this is the situation that people should be aware of. We do have a Telegram group. Consider joining. Like-minded individual, pretty cool room. And with that, see you in the next one. Have a good one.